Hey, I want to introduce to you guys this weekend Pastor Mike Stevens. He is new to the team and is here as our executive pastor of ministries, and his wife Kristen and three boys. And so glad to have you guys, Mike, and just to spend some time with you guys over the past few weeks and get to know you. And so what we like to do is when we bring someone new on the team, we like to give you guys as a church family an opportunity to get to know them. And so I've got a few questions we'll ask and talk about, and we'll just talk about life, ministry, and we both have boy families, so you got three boys, and we have our two boys, and everybody wants to talk about poop right now. So I don't know what that is, but it's a thing. So hey, can we just give our best Generation Church welcome to Pastor Mike? So glad you're here. So what we'd like to do is just ask a few questions and get to know you, get to know a little bit about your history and, you know, how you met Kristen, three boys, where you grew up, that kind of thing. So tell us just a little bit about you.
Well, I guess first off, I grew up in Central California, like near Fresno area, if you're familiar with California over there. Grew up in California, went to college near Sacramento. After that, I moved to Illinois for a couple years, and that's where I met my wife, Kristen. She's from Illinois. We dated for a couple years. Well, I guess we dated for a year. I was there for a couple years. And I asked her dad if I could marry her, and he said yes, as long as I never move away. So we got married, and then 6 months later, we moved away to Mississippi, where we've been for the last 12 years. But we have three boys, Miles, Max, and Maverick. You don't have to remember that. I know that's complicated. But they are 8, 5, and 2. So it's all Avengers. It's all wrestling at all times at our house. So
I love it. We had dinner with you guys a few weeks ago, and all the three boys, they all want to room together in a bedroom, and they have a 3-person bunk bed, and so it's fun. They're like wrestling, and it's WWF, and Hudson made himself the 4th Stevens child a couple of weeks ago. He did not want to leave. He was a little confused because there was not a 4th bunk bed for him.
Yeah, if I knew that my kids all wanted to stay in the same room for the rest of their lives, I would have saved a lot of money and just got a 1-bedroom house. But that's what's going on now.
Yeah, right. Well, you know what I just love about it, Mike, is it just really shows, just watching you guys with your boys, it really shows how great of parents you and Kristen are, and that your boys love each other so much, and it's just fun to watch those guys wrestle and play and jump on the trampoline.
And like 50% of the time they're wearing clothes, If you have boys, that's like the biggest challenge, is keeping the clothes on them.
Yes, yes. Mike, as we kind of get into this, I got just like a few kind of get to know you questions, kind of popcorn questions. So I'll just throw a bunch of things out there. You can speak to what you want. But, favorite movie, favorite music genre, Netflix, not Netflix? What do you guys like to do?
For us, I like I said, I grew up in California. So for me, I'm like a diehard Disney fan, where it's almost unhealthy how much I love Disney. You know what I mean? So I grew up going to Disneyland over in California all the time. So we'd go a few times a year from the time I was 4 years old until I got grown. And then I married a girl who loved Disney. So it worked out, She's like my own personal Ariel. She was just up here on the stage, and she wasn't even in here to hear that.
You just scored major points, bro.
But yeah, so we're probably the only people in Mississippi that had annual passes to Disney World. But we like love Disney. And so, that's what we love doing that as a family. We love traveling. We love spending time as a family. When it comes to movies, though, I don't even know what's popular anymore because we got 3 boys. We got to do whatever makes them happy so we can have a conversation. So, right now, I can tell you Encanto is on repeat pretty much every single day. So I don't know about your family, but for us, we don't talk about Bruno. No. Honestly, that's what we love. We love family time. We love watching movies as a family. Doing Mario Kart with the boys and all the things, Yeah,
that's awesome. All right, so a little about you. Are you a reader? Like, what's your favorite book, best book you've read recently?
Well, personally, you always hear that, leaders are readers, and I didn't grow up, being someone who loved reading, so I had to try to figure out how to build a discipline in there. So for me, a few years ago, I started jogging a lot. So I try to jog 3 to 5 miles a day, and in doing so, like I listen to audiobooks often, and so a few books that I wrote them down. A few books that I've really enjoyed recently, like this last month, The Blue Parakeet. Scott McKnight wrote that one. It's about how to read the Bible through God's lens and not your own. Because a lot of times we walk into Scripture with our own perceptions, right? A really good one. Another one that is called The Lead by Paul David Tripp. If you're a leader of any capacity, that's a great one as well. And then one from one of the pastors and mentors in my life right now, John Siebling. Him and Wayne Francis came together and wrote one called God and Race, talking about race in the church and how important it is for us to have those conversations. And so I'm currently in that one.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love to read. Okay, so you've been pastoring for years now, and 12 years an executive pastor, kids ministry pastor prior to that. So you've got an extensive journey in ministry. But what I want to know, and I think what we'd like to know, is like what excites you about being executive pastor in this season of your life?
Man, so I realized that this last year in October, I realized that I had been in ministry for 20 years. Which I'm dating myself a little bit there, but I started when I was 16 years old as an assistant kids pastor in Merced, California. I went on staff there at 16, so I know I started young, but I went from there to being doing a church plant when I was in college, helping with that, and then after college, I went and I was a kids pastor and a chaplain at a church in Mississippi, in Illinois, and so kids ministry and next gen is a huge piece of who I am. I love that. I don't believe that kids and youth are tomorrow's church. I believe they are today's church. And as a matter of fact,
I love it.
We have our student section right over here. What's up, guys? Yeah. We have our student section right over here. Woo. But they are leaders in the church. They're not tomorrow's leaders in the church, right?
Right.
And so they should be in the service. They should be serving. I mean, this is their church. And so I spent a long time in my career really pouring into the next generation. But then I went to Mississippi, and I did that for 12 years as an executive. And wild kind of story. We walked into a church that was 200 people in a town of 30,000. No Starbucks, no Target. It's tough, right? And so we walk into that church, and I really honestly thought that I would be there as the executive of a small church, and I'd still, at the time I was traveling around doing kids camps. I had a book out, all those things that come with that, and so I was spending a lot of my time doing that, but the church just took off. Like God led a movement in that area. Yeah. And so over the next decade, we got to be a part of something really special where that church grew from 200 to over 3,000 physically, with thousands more online in a town of 30,000. Yeah. That's 10% of the community. And so to be able to see like what God was doing and being, you can see the church leading the community, which was really special to be a part of. Yeah, and then because of some circumstances, I was even the interim lead pastor there towards the end. And so, it's been really a special ride in ministry to be able to see all the different areas of the church and be able to speak into that and lead in those areas.
I've really loved watching you as you've come in the past 4 weeks, and you're kind of learning and meeting with leaders, and I see your wheels turning, and you're starting to make some changes and build church, really, and build church for people. And if you've been to Next Steps, at the end of the Next Steps video, you'll find that we built this church, and we continue to build this church for you, for the individual. And when I first went to church, for the first time I stepped foot in a life-giving church, it felt like everything they did was for me. And it changed my life. And that's one of the things that excites me about having another one on the Enneagram on the team here to help us build church, because your lives are important, your families are important. And so we want to build a church that not only changes a community, but that one that changes history. That God does something amazing through, and that you're not just watching it happen, but you're a part of that journey. So tell us a little bit, Mike, like what are some of the amazing things that you've seen God do just supernaturally in your ministry journey over the years?
I think like ultimately it comes down to the things that I've loved the most is being able to see people find their purpose and make a difference in the community, right? I mean, I think what excites me the most about being an executive in general is I know what it takes to be in your seat. I didn't do it for very long. I did it only for 7 months. But there's a weight that a lead pastor carries for a community, and for a people, for a congregation. And so, I believe that my role and Pastor Aaron's role on the lead team is fairly simple. If you're a weightlifter, which like 50% of you here in Florida are apparently. I'm not taking my shirt off around you guys. So. but I can tell you that a pastor's weight, like the reps that you lift have to be less because the weight you carry is heavy. Whereas for myself and Pastor Aaron, we could be in and out of everything doing more reps because our weight is less. And where you see so many pastors and leaders get unhealthy nowadays is you see them fall and fail because they're trying to carry the heaviest weight and do the most reps. Yeah. Right? And ultimately, our role is we need to relieve you a little bit and let you pastor the church. Yeah. Right? Come on. And so what excites me about being here, the fact is that for me, I grew up with 11 pastors in my family. I didn't tell the first service this, but hey, you guys got the bonus track. I had 11 pastors in my family, so I grew up seeing the behind the scenes of church, but unfortunately for my family, most of them had broken homes, divorces, a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, those kind of things. And so for me, I have a passion to support you. I have a passion to support the lead pastor. I think a lot of... I think a lot of like Moses, when they were at war with the Amalekites, and if his hands were up, right, they were winning the war, but, he got tired and he was growing weary and his arms started going down, and so Aaron and Hur had to get there and like lift his arms up and support him. And I feel like Pastor Aaron, myself, Frank, like the team, our role is to get behind you, lift up your hands and say, look, there's a real spiritual war out there. There's a spiritual warfare. Let's not like downgrade that. There are souls at stake here. Yeah. And as long as you keep your hands up, I want to keep winning people for Jesus. Yeah. And so I'm going to hold your hands up for you.
I love it. So good.
I don't even know if I answered the question.
You did.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if you did or not. It was good.
I like Disney.
Yeah.
Is that where we...
There we go. Okay, so Pastor Mike, in your role as an executive pastor, part of the things that you oversee would be next steps, life groups, dream team, kind of those core life-giving functions of a ministry and of a church. And talk to us a little bit about the importance of those areas and how you've seen them just really work to disciple people and change a community.
I really believe that there's like three things that we need as people to be spiritually healthy. Whether you're an adult, a kid, student, it doesn't matter. Just as people, we are made in the image of God. And so, the first and foremost, we need the assembly of the believers, right? That's what we're doing today. We're at church together. It's the ecclesia in the Bible. We are the assembly of the believers, the church. And so we need that. The other thing that we need, though, is we need small groups. We need a small group of people that know us, that know me, that know what I'm walking through, who's not going to gossip about me, but is going to sit there and support me and love me through whatever I'm walking through. They hold me accountable. And you see that come up as small groups, life groups, Sunday schools, whatever you want to call it. But I believe that that's a huge part of what we need in life as a church, as a human being, to be spiritually healthy. And the other thing I believe is that we need to be serving in our community right here as a church, but also serving in outreaches, serving our community. We need to be selfless people, right? Yeah. Church should not be a selfish thing. Yeah. We brought this up last service a little bit when we started freestyling there for a second. But one of the things that a lot of times we do is we walk into church, like so many of us walk in selfishly, like, right? We like say, well, those are the songs I like. Yeah. This is the thing I like. This is what I want them to do. When in reality, we should be selfless, using the gifts that God's given us to go out and make a difference for the kingdom, right? Yeah. Come on. And so,
love it.
I think I'm just rolling. In Acts, you have the early church. And with the early church, you see that it says that no one was in need. It's not because there wasn't needs, right? There were still needs. It's because all the people came together. They used their gifts of the talents that God had given them, and they eliminated needs as they came. So our job as a church, we should all, 100% of us, we should all get in the game, unite, and start using the gifts and the talents that God gives us to eliminate the needs.
Yeah, love it.
Beyond these four walls, too.
So good. We talked about this in the first service, but it was in the local body, the local church, that Melissa and I discovered our gifts and talents. And we sit here today as pastors because of what God taught us and helped us discover in the local church. And I know for many of you guys, you have similar stories. And for those of you who are new to the church that haven't engaged yet, man, your destiny is there waiting to be discovered. And if this thing is the bride, which I believe it is, this is what Jesus is coming back for, then he has put a level of importance on the local church that exceeds everything else in this world, and he has made the local church your place of personal purpose and discovery. And what Pastor Mike's talking about is so important for you to engage in that, you'll discover so much about yourself. So good. By the way, the Bible also says that the greatest people among us are the greatest servants. And so, I mean, you just can't get away from that. Like serving and volunteering in your community is paramount for God. Being in community is paramount. So good. Okay, so what would you say, just for our generation, is the greatest kind of spiritual challenges that we face or we see in our current world?
I think one of the greatest challenges we see, and we saw this before COVID and all too, it affects our students and our kids so much, but it affects adults as well, and that's isolation. Isolation, I believe, is a huge one. You weren't made to be alone. You weren't made to be isolated, right? I mean, we could use so many different versions of this. I mean, we could talk about Adam, how he wasn't made to be alone, and so God brought him Eve. And we go on and on. The Bible has all these examples. You were not made to be isolated. But we did that with social media, right? We said our friends are the people online, and they weren't really our friends anymore. We started separating ourselves from people, and then COVID came, right? And so then when COVID's there, all of a sudden we're even more so separating ourselves because of fear. Yeah. And so now we're scared and alone. And I believe that's one of the things that we have to change, is we were not created to be alone.
Yeah. You said this in the first service, that isolation is actually a form of punishment that we use. We put people in prison in solitary confinement.
Yeah.
And it's a very aggressive form of punishment, but yet we find that in the general population today, that isolation is a huge ordeal.
And we do it to ourselves.
We do it
right?
to
We
ourselves.
punish ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think isolation is a huge one. I think busy calendars is a huge one. Yeah. I think a lot of times we now live in a world where we have access to everything. Yeah. And so we stay busy all the time. But one of the commands that we have is to have a Sabbath, to have a day off. And I myself do a poor job at this because I feel like I always need to be doing something. Yeah. But God says, hey, take a break, like breathe for a second and rest. But a lot of times we don't. Like we have like soccer games and baseball games, and now we're over here and doing we constantly have something, and we don't just rest and be with Him, fasting, praying. Those things are important to stay spiritually strong and healthy, right? And then also I think comparison's a huge one. We do this all the time, again, through social media a lot, but, even as a pastor, a lot of times, like, if you're on social media too much, I'll start comparing myself to other pastors in their churches and think, man, they're doing so much better than we are. Like, they're not struggling with anything, or like with parents or with marriages. Like, you're constantly comparing to other people, and the fact of the matter is, it's really easy to get into a bad place mentally whenever you're comparing your behind the scenes that to everyone else's highlight reel that they have. Right? They sat there and edited that thing. And you're not seeing the real life. Yeah. But I know my real life, and I'm starting to compare unevenly here. And so
I'm going to put Hudson's next temper tantrum on Facebook for all of you guys to see, just so you know your kid is not the only one.
Yes.
Okay, so I think it speaks so true to what our generation is facing. But I'd like to know, and I think our church family would like to know too, what are some of the opportunities and maybe some of the obstacles that can become opportunities that you see right here with this church coming in with your experience?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Whenever I was moving here just a month ago, we moved over Christmas, and as we're coming in, there's so many people that said, this area is so difficult to reach people because it's so unchurched. And that was like the obstacle. But from my perspective, I thought, that's a huge opportunity to reach more people for Jesus, right?
Yeah, come on.
I mean, so for me, I thought that was an opportunity. Now, in Mississippi, it was different. It was a different group of people. So in Mississippi, there's churches everywhere, and everyone is a Christian because they go to the great-grandma's church, twice a year or something like that. So our challenge there was we had to almost get people unsaved to get them saved. Yeah. You know what I mean? Whereas I'd much rather be able to say, hey, you're not a Christian and you're not living for God. That's great. Let's start at that place and go from there. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I think it's a huge, huge opportunity. And then also I think, just knowing you for the last month or so, I would say that you're willing to do just about anything to reach the lost for Jesus. Yeah. And in doing so, what's going to happen is we'll make decisions, I'm sure, because it happens all the time. No matter what decision you make, there's going to be a group of people that disagree. Right? There's going to be people that aren't for that, and that's fine, but at the end of the day, we're going to keep on changing the methods to reach the lost. The message won't change, but the methods have to in order to keep reaching people for Jesus.
So good. So good. I love it.
I'm having a hard time staying on this stool.
Me too. It's
I'm
all right.
Just swiveling over here.
Kick the table down, just preach. Which, by the way, he's going to be preaching next weekend. So
yes.
Make sure you come and shout.
I already warned the camera people. I like to walk around when I'm preaching, so they're just going to get their exercise.
Clear the stage. Okay, so one of my questions, Mike, we talked about this in the interview, but I think it's important for the church to hear it from you as well too. You know, you have a lot of experience. You could have went to a ton of different churches, had other offers and opportunities. Why did you guys choose to come and be a part of Generation Church?
You know, for that one, I had mentioned earlier, there was a point where some unfortunate things had happened at the church I was at before, so I became the interim lead pastor of our church for 7 months. But I didn't feel called to be a lead pastor of that group, and I wanted to support a pastor. And so the church and I, we worked it out to where once they had a new pastor, I could step away, and they would support me and my family until we figured out what God had next for us. And so I'm really thankful for them and their leadership. And but 4 months later, we met, right, you and I. And in that time, I had interviewed at a lot of different places, and some of the churches were churches as large as 20,000, and they had all these staff that would be under me, and these luxuries that would probably feel great, right? Yeah. But at this point in my life, I'm 36, and I feel very fortunate that Chris and I have had the opportunity to have some of the experience that we had. We got to be a part of a really fast-growing church. I got to spend time with the people that we would label as celebrity pastors, which is a weird thing. I mean, like, it's weird, right? Where none of that really matters anymore. So at this point for us, we were looking for a church that we believed in the vision, where they were headed, and what they were going to do for Jesus. We wanted a church where we could find family. We wanted a church where the leadership was healthy, not perfect, but healthy. We wanted to be somewhere where we knew we could be for the remainder. You know, for better or for worse, we wanted to marry you. And so, you know, the more we talked with you and Melissa, the more we fell in love with you guys. Yeah. And we walked away from the interview here, and something that he didn't know until this morning when I told him. We walked away from the interview here, and Chris and I looked at each other and said, if they offer us a position, we're going to say yes. And so, luckily, he felt the same way. So, so here we are. You know, we just feel like it's family.
Yeah. Well, I can say the same. Hey, go ahead. I can say the same. Like, we just felt really connected with you guys right away. And you're one on the Enneagram, just like me and Jeff and all the other ones out there. So, you know, perfectionists, let's unite.
No one wants that.
No, yeah. So I, just felt really connected with you guys. And, one of the things I love about you, Mike, is your heart for the local church. And you just want to build church. You want to build people. And you want to make a difference in this world for God, like an eternal difference. And that's one of the things that excites me, because I feel like you and I just think about things a lot in very similar terms. And so, to have someone else on the team that's building church and that loves church is super important to me. And so just kind of transitioning a little bit, I'd like to hear from you. Like, I did Vision Sunday a couple of weeks ago. If you missed it, go online, watch Vision Sunday, so you know where God is taking us for the next 12 months and the next 60 months, so that you can help push in that. But I want to hear from you too, just coming in as an executive pastor. Where do you see God taking us under your roles over the next year, 5 years, 10 years? What do you see?
Well, I think if you look at the future, I really truly believe that Generation Church is built to be a church where we see over 10,000 people and 10 plus campuses and all those things, right? And you might be hearing that go like, well, it's all about the numbers. No, it's not about the numbers. I don't care about the numbers. That doesn't have anything to do with it. I truly believe that as a church, as long as I have a neighbor who doesn't know Jesus, as long as we are in the reach of someone who doesn't have a relationship with Christ, not just a religion, right? If they don't have a relationship with Christ, then we have a mandate to grow. Yeah. We have a mandate to reach the lost for Jesus, period. Yeah. And so I feel like we have it's the right time for our church to just boom. But I truly believe that the pace of the vision is up to the people. Yeah. Like, people determine the pace. Yes. And so honestly, within 5 years, I would say within 5 years, I see us having at least one other campus. and maybe one in the oven, right? At least. But ultimately, the thing I think is even more important, and I think within 5 years, is that we will be known for having a dynamic kids and youth ministry, period. Because that's where the priority is, right?
Come on.
I want to see these guys leading our church. I want to be hiring these guys over here that are in our student ministry, right? Like turn in your resume now. Well, I'll pick it up 5 years from now, right? So here's the thing, like they are who we're building right now. That's the priority. Also, I want us to be a church that's known in the community, known for being there first in reaching the law, at least reaching the people that are hurting and broken and being the hands and feet of Jesus. So within 5 years, I'd say that. The next 12 months, I think I'm going to be doing a lot of behind-the-scenes structures and systems because I am a one. I'm going to do a lot of those things, and those things aren't sexy. I know that. But at the same time, like it's building a foundation to grow on and build on.
Yeah, it's awesome. We're the only ones who love systems, but you're going to love it because it helps us as a church meet your needs, minister to you, and engage you and unleash you in what God's called you and created you to do. You know, part of what God spoke to me for this next year out of 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 24 was that we all run. And I want to invite every single one of you to find a place to connect and engage as Mike's leading these teams and making space for you. I want you to connect. I want you to run this year. Don't be a spectator in a participator sport. Find a place that you can make a difference. So we all run. The other thing that God spoke to me about this year for us as a church family is that we run to win. Like you could have went anywhere, but you came here because you felt like God has purpose for this church and this family and a place for you guys to come and make a big difference. And I want to challenge our church family as well, too. Like we're doing this thing to make a difference for eternity. I want to change this community. I want to change the spiritual fabric of this region in South Florida. And I want what God does through our church to be written in the annals of heaven. Like the record books of heaven. Look what these people did because they were running to win. And then the last thing God spoke to me is that we do this for a higher purpose. Like, guys, we live in the most unchurched community in America, and we have an opportunity to change the trajectory of people who are spiritually on their way to an eternal separation from God. And we get a chance to point them to Jesus. Like, that's huge. And so I want to encourage you guys as a church family. Let's get behind Pastor Mike and all that he's doing as we build for this next season. So, Pastor Mike, tell us this. How can we as a church partner with you best?
I think it's pretty simple. I think everyone in this room and watching online, we all need to take a step, right? We all need to take one more step. So if we're not in the game, we need to get off the bench and get in the game, right? Maybe you're in the game, you have more capacity. So let's step it up and like lean into what God has for you and use your passions and your gifts and your talents that God has given you. You know, I told the dream team this morning, and I didn't tell first service, so they'll have to watch this one. But you know, the story that I love in the Bible is Peter walking on water. Yeah. And I think so many times, like we focus on the fact that Peter got out of the boat and he focused on the storms around him, and we focus on that part of the story and how Jesus had to reach out and pick him back up. But the fact of the matter is, the 11 other disciples just sat scared in the boat.
Yeah.
You know, why don't we celebrate the fact that Peter got out of the boat and he's one of two people in all of human history, other than Jesus, that walked on water, right? So for all of us, I think some of us, it's time to get out of the boat.
Yeah.
Right?
Come on. Amen.
Amen that. Come on now.
I love it. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about is just this idea of like the importance of the church, you know, as the hope of the world. Yeah. And you know, it's what gets me up every day. It's what gets you up every day. And I wanted to read this passage to you in Ephesians chapter 1. This is from the Message paraphrase. It says this: all this energy issues from Christ, meaning the power that raised him from the dead. It says God raised him from death and set him on a throne deep in heaven, in charge of running the universe, everything from galaxies to governments. No name and no power are exempt from his rule. And not just for the time being, but forever. He is in charge of it all. He has the final word on everything. At the center of all of this, Christ rules the church. The church, you see, is not peripheral to the world, but the world is peripheral to the church. The church is Christ's body in which he speaks and acts, by which he fills everything with his presence. And I wanted to dialogue just a little bit about why we do what we do. You know, why do we build a church? If the world is peripheral to the church, then why do we do this? And how do you partner in that as well, in that mission? So talk to us a little bit about your why.
Because at the end of the day, all of us have a calling and a purpose that God's put in us. And we all have gifts and abilities and talents that God's put in us. And we are the body of Christ, right? So ultimately, we should be coming together to be a united body to make a difference for the kingdom of God. Yeah. And whenever that happens, the church really does lead the world. More so than what we even realize, I think, sometimes, because ultimately so many hospitals, they were put there because a church started that, right? I mean, and took care of the hurting and the sick. And there's people that have food because churches have stepped in and started organizations and outreaches and all of that. And there's back in the day that was there's all these kids with fatherless homes. And so the church stepped up and started sidewalk schools and started kids ministry and started raising up the next generation and tried to be the parent that wasn't there, right? Yeah. And so ultimately, whenever a church unites and comes together, special things happen for the world around us. Yeah. Again, it's not about what just happens inside the walls. It's what happens outside of it through us, right? So I truly believe that when we come together, something special happens. But we have to put sometimes our opinions and our differences and the things that I like here and there, all that we have to put aside and say, look, I'm coming together for the vision and for the purpose of this church. Yeah. And we're going to do this thing. We're going to do something really special.
Yeah, I love it. It's mission over preference. Yeah. You know, we put the mission of Jesus over everything else. And what drives us is that desire to build something that changes lives, because we both experienced that in our families. And we want that for you as well, that it would be a place of discovery, a place of spiritual intimacy with God, and a place where you stand before God one day and you hear him say, well done, good and faithful servant. And I think this is not something that just pastors do. This is something that God invites the entire body to, that we all play a part in that. We all have a piece in this puzzle, this game of life. And so I invite you guys as a church to support what Pastor Mike is doing. Get behind him. Get on a team. Get in a group. Serve. Allow God to do something truly tremendous through your life in this next season. Pastor Mike, so glad you guys are here. Love it, man. And can we just give our best Generation Church welcome to Pastor Mike?